All right. Welcome to the wrap up. So, like I said, 4-1 overall. Not bad. I have been only playing, this most recent time with Amulet with this particular list. I've played 20 matches so far. And I guess overall, not including the 5 for this video. And I guess overall I was 12 and 6. So that's not how math works. 12 and 8, excuse me. So not a great record overall. I had four 3-2s and nothing else. So nothing terribly exciting to write home about, but you got to remember that I'm sure, A, I know for a fact that I punted some of those, and B, I'm sure I punted ones that I also don't know about. This deck has a lot of lines. There is often a better one than the one that I am taking, I'm sure. And especially the first few leagues getting back into the deck again, I definitely made some extra mistakes. It does take some time to get used to, for sure, considering that the lines of thought are kind of dramatically different than most Magic decks. It's just very different than normal Magic playing this deck. But it is very enjoyable. I certainly recommend it to anyone who thinks it may look like fun. On Moto for Modern, it's not terribly expensive. It's like, I don't know, 275 tickets or a little more than that perhaps. But paper, it can be a hassle. Obviously, Zeus's are a little bit expensive in paper, and there's not a lot of overlap in this deck with other decks, at least where the money is. Like, there's not a lot of decks that play a Zeus. Obviously, there's some overlap with like Primetime and Summoners packs and stuff like that. So it's not terrible, but you get the idea. But yeah, I really enjoy this deck. This particular list I have enjoyed thus far. We talked about it a little bit in the deck tech, but the distinction between Pyroclasm and K-Return is one that I'm interested in continuing to explore. I've liked having Pyroclasm this time, but last time I liked having K-Return. It's definitely something I want to continue to test, but right now I'm enjoying the 2 mana casting cost of Pyroclasm. Even against something like Affinity, it can make a big difference to be killing Steel Overseer the turn previous. Yes, it's not as good against Edge Champion, but we do have stuff like Ballista or even Engineered Explosives for that potentially as well. Ballista, a huge tutor target, as well as Engineered Explosives, a huge tutor target against Affinity, both obviously being very powerful. Plus, we already have a lot of dedicated, well, not even dedicated, but we already have a lot of good hate against Affinity, so I'm not really sure it's necessary to have the K-Return, and that's really the only matchup where I'm like very glad I have K-Return over Pyroclasm. Stuff like Devoted Druid, you really want Pyroclasm against as well, but anyway, I don't want to be too repetitive, but that's one of the kind of sticking points or flexible points of the list, I guess, so it's worth mentioning. I wouldn't necessarily mind having a third Dismember. I really do like having the second Engineered Explosives, and the one big slot that I'm not really sure is earning its space is this Rurikthar. Most people are super polarized in this card. Some people absolutely love Rurikthar in this deck. Some people are like, totally unnecessary, don't need it, you know, whatever, get it out of there. I'm somewhere in between, but and because I'm somewhere in between, I keep playing with it. The whole time I've been like, not super excited about this Rurikthar. Maybe we'll cut this Rurikthar. My stream's probably like totally tired of me being like, you know, discussing the deck and saying maybe Rurikthar is going to get the axe, but I just haven't ended up axing him because there's not necessarily something else I want in that slot. Maybe a third tracker, maybe some other 5 or 6, 7 mana thing. You know, those are certainly options, but there's nothing in particular that I'm like super excited about. You've seen me do it a bunch today, and it's something I really like doing with this deck, but where you side into this kind of, you know, slower amuletless ramp deck, and I want to have something that I'm always willing to bring in that sense. Whenever I'm cutting my amulets and bringing in this package, I want this card to be something I'm always bringing in, which is kind of why I want to cut the Rurikthar, and why I probably will eventually do that if I can ever get myself to do it. I'm kind of slow to make changes in my list. It's probably too slow. The other kind of sticking points, like obviously you saw in the mirror, our opponent had a second Ghost Quarter and it was great. Sometimes that can be great. Having a second Ghost Quarter in your 75 is not bad. It's just hard to find space, obviously. Bajuka Bog in the main is also sometimes a sticking point. You'll see that in the board sometimes. See a 27 land list, something like that. Those are really the only lands I would consider changing. Sometimes you'll see different numbers of groves, but I'm pretty happy with 2 groves, I think. Other than that, like the other sticking points are kind of explorers and relics. I think you'll find that well, I guess Fourth Azusa is also a thing you'll see sometimes. I don't particularly like Fourth Azusa. I think I think we're better off without it. Like, obviously the card's really important, but you'll shave it a lot when sideboarding, and drawing multiple Azusas, as you saw a bunch today, is a pain. It's just a pain. But these cards can change around a lot too. Basically the numbers of explorers. You really do want to be playing explorer, but the number of explorer can change. Anywhere from 2 to 4, I think, is a reasonable number to play, which is perhaps why you see me here on 3. And then these relics are really interesting because it's really just a meta call whether or not you want to be on these relics. You'll see, like, historically lists have been on things like Serum Visions, which I really don't like in the deck. It's kind of hard to cast, and if you were on a Serum Visions list, obviously our mana base would be dramatically different. We wouldn't have groves, we'd have botanical sanctums, probably 3 of them, stuff like that. But they can still be difficult to cast your Serum Visions, and they can be very clunky. I much prefer relics at the moment, but you'll see, like, a lot of the stuff we're talking about is ways the deck has adapted because of Shadow, right? The deck has kind of went in this direction because of Shadow. So having groves as a hedge obviously is a clear nod to Shadow. Having Relic of Progenitus in your main, another clear nod to Shadow instead of something like Serum Visions. So obviously if the meta changes, maybe that's not something you're interested in, but still, Relic is so powerful against a lot of the decks in the meta, and at worst it's a cantrip, which is kind of what you want for that slot anyway. So a good card that interacts often in ways that can be very annoying for your opponent to slow them down a bit, while also being a cantrip, is kind of perfect for that slot. So I'm not really sure we'll ever find a different card for that slot, but I guess that's something that, as if and when the meta shifts, something you could be looking to change. And again, the number of explorers. The rest of this stuff I'm really happy with, except for the lands that I mentioned. Obviously you could flex depending on how the meta shifts as well, but again, the rest of it's pretty set in stone. As far as the sideboard's concerned, we obviously didn't side Swan Songs in today. I still think they need to be in the list. They really come in handy in control matchups. So I think there's kind of a requirement. But the problem is you don't really get to side Swan Song in against tempo decks like you saw against Nightfall there. We can't really bring it in because of the bird is actually going to be a huge hassle for us to deal with as well. So not the most flexible counterspell, but one that I think is good for us against control decks. On top of that, we didn't really use the Seal Primordium or the Rex Sage either, but these are really great not only against Affinity, but this is your kind of Blood Moon package. You might ask why these 2 particular ways to blow up Blood Moon. Well, Rex Sage you can tutor for with Summoner's Pact, and again, some of this is a little bit repetitive with some of the deck tech stuff too, but I just feel like it's worth noting again while we're going through the list that you know, this is a tutorable thing, and this you can play before Blood Moon even if you don't have a basic forest. So that's kind of why these are 2 hate pieces. And then we've kind of already discussed all the rest of this. So anyway, the bottom line is, without rambling too long here, that I do like this list where we're at. There's not much I really want to change at this point, as I said. And if you're interested in the deck, definitely recommend trying to pick it up. It's a lot of fun to play. Does take some time to get used to, but it's certainly a blast. I really enjoy playing this deck. I enjoyed playing it a lot last time, and I'm glad to be back. If you want a little more of the content, I am also going to be continuing to stream with this deck as much as I can, so we'll definitely be available there. But either way, I appreciate you watching. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave any kind of criticism or comments below, and I'll try to get to those when I get the chance. But either way, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.